Good morning to you, and thank you so much for finding time to joining us this day. Let's take a look at the headlines from across the continent of Africa. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Miriam Oguta, and thank you so much, and welcome to the show. We'll start with the newspapers from Kenya. The Standard newspaper, Ruto's university funding shocker. Major win for students from poor households as president opens a path for free college education, with only deserving cases getting um, graduated state funding to pursue degree, diploma, and certificate courses. And salaries, MCA's threat on budgets, and then the economic blows that hit Kenyans hard. Why Azimio leaders called off demos, and inside race to pick new moneymen, and angry Gunners show they are still in the title race. I guess that is on football or soccer, depending on how you call it. The Daily Nation, closing ranks. Raila camps allied to President William Ruto and Azimio chief Raila Odinga, rival camp, yesterday struck a compromise on the bipartisan talks after Kenya Kwanza withdrew Jubilee's Aidan Kainan from the MPs committee, and the opposition side called off today's planned protest. The two sides also closed ranks on a proposal to amend the constitution to create the office of the leader of opposition. And I think calling off these demos, I think is the best thing for Kenya right now. Can you imagine all these high-level visitors we are having in the country? Secretary General of United Nations, Antonio Guterres, is here. I think the Prime Minister of Japan already left. And we have German Chancellor who is supposed to be visiting Kenya with potential investors. And then they come in the middle of a chaos, political, that might give them a wrong signal that we have a political instability. We don't have that. Kenya is very stable, but when you visit and that is what is happening, you can have that in mind, and so that can really hurt, especially our economy that is reeling from being battered by COVID and other things. So I think that the way they've chosen to work these things, I think is better for the country and all of us. So let them continue talking. I think when you talk, there is nothing really you can't fix or you can't find a solution to. So I guess I don't know if I want to give them kudos, but I just leave that there. Ruto unveils new funding model for universities, while plan to block Uhuru's pension is a tall order. The Star newspaper, Azimio dares Ruto on Uhuru Raila packs, Odinga allies trash motion as illegal, tell president's lieutenants to bring it on. Okay, the People Daily, Kenya's economy recovering. Fresh data from Treasury paints picture of country rising from the effects of drought, Russia-Ukraine war, and strong dollar to register growth in critical sector. Azimio calls off demos as talks set to reopen. That's some great news. Business Daily, salaries plunge in real terms for 3 consecutive years. That's what we have then. Land prices in Ruaka town race ahead of Runda, Karen. Okay. People from Ruaka, how is it that your land go at the same price as that of Runda and Karen? It's interesting. I will ask them later. They will tell me. Okay, let's look at some of the other newspapers from across the continent. The Daily Monitor. Drivers fix on Angola shooting. Right, that and then the Herald from where is this from? I think from Zimbabwe. Post primaries, time to close ranks, and crowning moment for re-engagement. Okay, so as president leaves to UK, President Mnangagwa is leaving to the UK. What am I reading here? I guess he's leaving to the UK, even after it was debated in Parliament, the UK Parliament, of whether he was to be allowed. I think some politicians there, a section of them were having a feeling that President Mnangagwa should not be invited to the coronation of King Charles III because of the human rights abuses that they allege are ongoing, the shrinkage of some freedoms in Zimbabwe, among other things, that also has plagued other countries in Africa, but every now and then President Mnangagwa is singled out. Although when you look at the reports and what has been happening in Zimbabwe, I think there's a cause for concern. And in the recent past, there has been an increase of even political prisoners and things like that. So maybe those are things also that the leadership of Zimbabwe needs to look at and just see how they can reform. Like, the world is moving so fast, and politics and the dynamics of it is changing. And if you can have politics that you have a diversity of ideas and ideologies, but still you're held together at the core that you're all Zimbabweans and you still have a country, and do everything in the interest of the people and what moves the country forward, be it in opposition or the government. I think if we can really look at our politics in that way, and at the end of the day see, is it at the best interest of my country as a leader that I'm supporting this decision or I'm making this decision. I think that can aid us in moving very far in how we engage, because politics really determines a lot in how even a country can grow. When you have politics that is toxic, politics that is not tolerant, politics that is not attractive even to foreign investors, then you are doing your country a disservice. Even as some of these allegations and how Zimbabwe is treated and some of the sanctions are unfair, but also there is a part that Zimbabwe and its people and the leadership of Zimbabwe, there's something that you can do to change some of these things that are happening in your country, that some of them, we are moving forward in this world. So if you have embraced democracy fully, like you have, because you have an electoral process and all these things, then that cannot be in the absence of certain tenets that protect that democracy, that acts as safeguards, and that is a robust opposition, a robust civil society, a media that is allowed to do its job, of course, within the precepts of the Constitution. That's all I'm saying. So, as much as I do understand, and some of these sanctions and some of these sentiments from the Western world especially is very targeted, but also you do have a part that you're playing there that might not even be sitting right by your own people. Okay, I'll just move on from that. The Daily News, this is from Tanzania. Thank you, Samia. Listen, Samia has become the magic wonder there in Tanzania. Let me see if I can get the subtitles here. Professor J speaks out on his ailment. Spends 127 days in ICU, says he'll be back soon. He's a musician, a bongo musician from Tanzania, but he is a member of parliament now. I guess he was not feeling well. He's back now. So, okay, I guess he's the one thanking Samia. A prime minister paints a bright future for livestock fisheries sector. Come on now, we need that over here. When are we going to have a painting of a bright future in fisheries, for instance? All we hear is our fish are dying in Lake Victoria. What is not happening? Are we not sharing the same lake with Tanzania? Yeah, what's going on? Kenya. Mwinyi, good work, exercise, patriotism. That's exactly right. That's what we need even here. Data Protection Act comes into effect. Okay. The Citizen from Tanzania as well. How banks got off to a flying start in 2023. The combined net profit of 13 first-tier lenders, which account for over 90% of the industry's profitability, rose by 20% during the first quarter of 2023 compared to the corresponding period in 2022. That is in Tanzania. Mwinyi's 5 directions on press freedom. Okay, what should be done to help youth fulfill career aspirations? And the national appeal. Okay, let's just leave that there. The Nation this is from Nigeria. I will not marginalize any part of Nigeria, Tinubu pledges. President-elect. What is this? I can't see that properly, but that is what he's saying. Minister blames NIS for passport issuers crisis, and Labour disrupts Owerri-bound flights in Lagos, Abuja, and others. Zoning of National Assembly top post, APC targets consensus. Okay. The Daily Trust, also from Nigeria. Speakership, opposition intensifies plot to upstage APC, says we are more than prepared. It is a fruitless move, Chief. That's according to the Chief Whip. We will abide by ruling party's decision. That is according to the Task Force Forum. And then Sudan crisis, Nigerian evacuees airlifted from Egypt without luggage. Okay. All right. Okay. The Punch also from Nigeria. Outrage as Senate approves Buhari's 22.7 trillion naira extra budgetary spending. But he's leaving. Okay. So fresh borrowing from CBN illegal. Suspicious, say NECA economist. And 22.7 trillion extra budgetary spending to raise public debt to 69 trillion naira. Agenda 2050 federal government projects 33,000 US dollars per capita GDP, and then APC NWC fails to zone National Assembly leadership seats, and police arrest Osun twins for cultism, and Senate proposes life jail for unlawful explosives makers. Okay. And then just up there, 376 stranded Nigerians airlifted from Egypt. That is, they were in Sudan, and federal government disconnects discourse from national grid over debt. What is that? I hope it's not the disco that we know. The Daily News from Zimbabwe. Major issues as Zimbabwe redollarizes. Prices soar. Some basic goods disappear from shops. So now I think many of the businesses in North Nigeria and Zimbabwe prefer doing their businesses using dollar as the currency of choice because of the high inflation on the local currency in Zimbabwe. So things are not looking up there. So let's head over to the United States. The Guardian, the U.S. edition. Ilhan Omar condemns U.S. failure to act since John Floyd. She calls that a broken system. The New York Times, Joe Bribin, what is that? FBI has secret file alleging that the then VP Biden took money from foreign national whistleblower. Okay. USA Today, it is a tragic day. Search for missing teens leads to 7 bodies in rural Oklahoma. Woman says daughter and 3 grandchildren among them. Inflation hitting hard in prisons. Deadly Illinois pileup could be dire warning. The New York Times. Several headlines there. Allegations fly after 2 blasts above Kremlin. War leading Europe to divert its social spending to defense. Business favor for climate plan is driving up cost to taxpayers, and federal raises rates above the Fed raises rates above 5%, highest since 2007, and how a U.S. plan for democracy in Sudan ended in a hasty exit. You see, that's exactly right. The Washington Post. Fed sees a fraud path after rate hike. Drones explode at the Kremlin. New York forbids gas hookups in new homes. At hospitals and doctors' offices, masks come off. Okay, I get that is some good news. People are relaxing from those COVID regulations. Let's head over to the United Kingdom. Let the pomp and the pageantry begin on the Daily Mail here. Biggest security operation ever. 11,500 officers to guard coronation. Facial recognition cameras will be scanning the crowds. 2 days to go. For those who are monarchists, there you go. The Daily Mirror. King protest warning. Royal security crackdown on 16 years old Maddie's sister lights candle in her memory. And then the iNews. UK plan for Charles III to help lead Brexit detox with Europe. And the Metro, ring of steel thrown around Charles. Okay. Financial Times, LSE chief, that is the London Stock Exchange, chief seeks higher pay for bosses to stem listings exodus, and Ukraine denies Russian accusations that it tried to assassinate Putin. I was watching that so-called attack that Kremlin is insisting, happened, and it targeted this a place, and apparently it was to assassinate Putin, and nobody was hurt. There's not much destruction that was reported. So there are some analysts who are in the opinion that there's a possibility that this is just Kremlin, perhaps orchestrating this, trying to look for a reason really to have a blown attack on Ukraine. Because if you keep saying that President Putin has been targeted for an assassination by Ukraine, then obviously you're setting grounds to intensify your attacks or do something much out of proportion from what you've been doing, Putin. So that is one side of that. And the Ukraine has said it's not attacked. It did not carry out these attacks, but Putin is insisting, and so I don't know if he's just setting ground for a big attack on Ukraine out of frustration. And I didn't think he saw this war, dragging as long as it has. It's over 1 year now, and it's still going on. But I think it's about time this came to an end, and maybe we need other mediators. China has been insisting on taking on this mediation. I think President Xi Jinping spoke with Ukrainian President about a week ago or something like that, and he's just trying to find a solution. Will China be able to mediate successfully this process? I don't know, because China and Russia, they're very close. They have very close diplomatic ties, and I don't know if China will be the right person to mediate that. But also, China could also be the right person to mediate that because of their close proximity to Russia. But that will make the other side a bit uncomfortable, because you don't know, will China be holding a brief for Russia, or will they be seeking to just end this unnecessary conflict from a neutral position that the both countries can agree upon? So many questions, but I think China can handle this mediation, but I don't know if that will sit well with Ukraine, because they already have a feeling that China is biased towards Russia. But nevertheless, I think we do need a quick resolution for this conflict. It has really, really gone on more than it should have even. And the independent, still from the United Kingdom, Falklands war hero Afghan pilot deserves asylum. Simon Weston joins growing army of veterans backing our call to stop deportation of Afghan who flew alongside UK forces against Taliban. So you're sending him back after using him and all that. United Kingdom, that's not cool. That's not okay, I guess. All right, so we shall leave that there. Let's get on and look at some of the detailed news bulletin from across the continent of Africa. You are now up to date, about 20 minutes past 10 a.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. I trust that your day has started off well. We start from the latest update from Sudan. An envoy of Sudan's Army Commander General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has ruled out face-to-face talks with the paramilitary force trying to overthrow him, Reuters news agency has now reported. Dafala al-Hajj said the army accepted an initiative being spearheaded by the United States and Saudi Arabia to broker a ceasefire, but communication with the rapid support forces would have to be through mediators, the agency quoted him as saying at a press conference in Egypt's capital in Cairo. On Monday, the UN Special Envoy to Sudan, Volker Perthes, told the AP news agency that the two sides had agreed to negotiate a stable and reliable ceasefire, and Saudi Arabia being a potential venue for the talks. The military has continued with airstrikes in the capital Khartoum in an attempt to weaken the RSF. The paramilitaries are said to control most of Khartoum, with hardly any army soldiers or police officers on the streets. Previous attempts by international mediators to broker a truce have failed, with both sides violating it. South Sudan's foreign minister said on Tuesday that the military and RSF have agreed in principle to a new 7-day truce from Thursday. Since the conflict erupted on the 15th of April, more than 100,000 people have fled Sudan, and more than 300,000 have been displaced inside the country. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has called on the warring factions in Sudan to stop the fighting immediately before the fighting escalates into an all-out war. Speaking in Kenya, Mr. Guterres said the people in Sudan were facing a humanitarian catastrophe with hospitals destroyed, food aid warehouses looted, and millions facing food insecurity. Earlier, the UN's humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths, who is in Sudan, said he's trying to get commitments from all sides to allow humanitarian supplies into the worst affected areas. The Sudanese factions have agreed a new 7-day truce starting on Thursday, that is today, but previous ceasefires have broken down. Mr. Griffiths said 6 trucks belonging to the United Nations World Food Programme were looted on their way to the troubled region of Darfur, despite assurances that they will be safe. And in South Africa, the country has unveiled new banknotes and coins, the country's first major upgrade to its currency in more than a decade. The South African Reserve Bank, SAB, announced the changes on Wednesday, saying the move was meant to keep up with technology and prevent counterfeiting. The new notes, which will enter into circulation from Thursday, will retain the image of Nelson Mandela, the country's first democratically elected president who died in 2013. Africa's so-called Big Five wild animals, rhino, elephant, lion, buffalo, and leopard, will now be depicted with their young ones on the banknotes. The coins will have an ecological theme through pictures of plants and animals. South Africa's 11 official languages will also be represented on the various banknotes and coins. There will also be specific physical characteristics to help visually impaired people differentiate the notes. There are no changes, however, to any of the denominations or size of the banknotes. Existing banknotes and coins will continue to remain legal tender and can be used alongside the upgraded banknotes, according to SAB. The notes will also be rolled out in Namibia, Eswatini, and Lesotho, that are in a common monetary area with South Africa and where the rand is considered legal tender alongside their own currencies, said Fundin Shanzibana, the deputy governor of the South African Reserve Bank. And back to Sudan, the United Nations aid chief has said it will be difficult to secure an end to the fighting in Sudan as the warring parties are keen to keep it going. Martin Griffiths was speaking to the BBC after visiting Port Sudan on the Red Sea coast. He said he had asked the rival generals who were fighting for control to meet him face to face to discuss urgent delivery of humanitarian aid. He said the two rival parties spoke of their attachment to humanitarian principles, but they did not seem to be anywhere to end the war. And a new 7-day truce that starts today. But previously, these ceasefires had broken down. Mr. Griffith said he'd heard stories of dramatic atrocities that were likely to lead to what he called a generational problem with reconciliation. And in Mozambique, the military has gained control of a lake from militant Islamists in the northern Cabo Delgado region. President Felipe Nyusi has said he praised the young soldiers who have been fighting in the insurgents. More than 4,000 people have been killed and 800,000 others forced from their homes since militant Islamists launched an insurgency in Cabo Delgado in 2017. And we head over to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Rebels linked to the Islamic State group attacked a village in the DRC's volatile east, killing at least 6 people. Local authorities said on Tuesday hundreds of people have been killed in rebel and militia attacks in the gold-rich Ituri province, where the IS-linked Allied Democratic Forces also operate. The ADF, originally insurgents in Uganda, gained a foothold in the eastern DRC in 1990s and have since been accused of killing thousands of civilians, becoming the deadliest of scores of outlawed forces in the deeply troubled region. And more than 150,000 people were killed in Ituri in the first half of April, according to the United Nations. It says nearly 500 people have been killed between December and March. Ituri and the neighboring North Kivu province have been under the so-called stage of siege since 2021, with security officials running the local governments in a bid to stamp out the violence. The DRC and Uganda also launched a joint offensive that year to drive the ADF out of their Congolese strongholds, but the measures have so far failed. to end the ADF's attack. And nearly a month since armed conflict began between rival factions of the military government of Sudan, efforts by the international community to broker a truce in the country have failed as both parties repeatedly violated 3 ceasefire agreements. But leaders in East Africa say they will ban military rule in the region. Speaking in Nairobi on Tuesday, Kenyan President William Ruto said Sudan had already made progress towards governance and the East African leaders would not allow what he termed a small disagreement to destroy those gains. He also said the soldiers will be held accountable. The Intergovernmental Authority on Development agreed last week to send South Sudan's President Salva Kiir, Kenya's Ruto, and Ismail Omar of Djibouti to help broker a ceasefire in Sudan. Sudan's former colony brokered the latest ceasefire, and President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, there said that military rule will not be allowed in Sudan. Okay, let's just move on from that. Malawi's president is appealing for international help, saying the country needs about 7,000 million US dollars to rebuild after a storm killed more than 1,000 people in March. President Lazarus Chakwera said this week Malawi lost about 500 million US dollars to tropical cyclone Freddy. The cyclone, which also affected Mozambique and Madagascar, hit 15 districts in southern Malawi, rendering nearly 700,000 people homeless. Chakwera said Malawi would respond to the problem like a nation under attack, not a nation under threat. He appealed for international help. With rebuilding infrastructure lost to Freddy, Chakwera left the country on Wednesday for the United Kingdom, where he is expected to meet world leaders during the coronation of King Charles III of Britain. Chakwera's appeal comes 2 weeks after the UN renewed a flash appeal to humanitarian partners made in April for 70.6 million US dollars to support the cyclone victims in Malawi, and the UN says less than 11% was donated. Now, if that was in Ukraine or somewhere else, they would have received more than that times over. I believe so. Okay. Finally, the United Nations is relocating its Africa Projects Management Entity to Nairobi, indicating its desire to concentrate on achieving Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, in African countries. The United Nations Office for Project Services, UNOPS, will move to Nairobi, which is also the headquarters of the UN in the Southern Hemisphere. A self-financing entity, UNOPS has had its Africa Regional Office housed under the same roof of its global headquarters in Copenhagen, Denmark, but often implements projects in crisis-hit countries across the continent, especially those at war or recovering from conflict. It acts as a project implementer of other UN agencies or programs and charges them a fee by providing infrastructure, procuring supplies, and managing UN projects, especially those allied to the SDGs. A statement from the entity said having the regional office in Nairobi will strengthen the organization's capacity to support its partners on the continent. UNOPS Executive Director Jorge Moreira de Silva, who is on a visit to Nairobi, said the regional office is moving closer to where it is needed. UNOPS was established in 1973 as part of the United Nations Development Programme UNDP, but it separated in 1995 to focus on independent operations where it provides services to the UN system at a fee. In Africa, it has been, since the days of Kofi Annan as the UN Secretary General, been the lead projects entity in conflict areas globally. It handles a portfolio of $3 billion worth of development projects annually, usually involved in the construction of social facilities like schools and clinics, erecting temporary shelters for displaced people, and procuring emergency response equipment for outbreaks such as Ebola and now COVID-19. The UNOPS said its Africa Regional Office relocating to Nairobi will be completed before the end of the year. And that is the latest news. So now, Kenya, you understand why your stability, your political stability, and sanitized politics is important. When you have such offices having confidence. You already have UNEP headquarters here in Nairobi, and very few cities, maybe 4 across the world. That will be Nairobi, Geneva, United New York, and which other one? About 4, where we have this major UN headquarters, and maybe The Hague, yeah. But the only 4 cities that, because the rest of them are in New York and all over, but only 4 cities around the world boast of having this key major infrastructure of the United Nations, these important offices of the United Nations. And Nairobi is blessed to have that. And we've seen how that has transformed, especially areas closer to the United Nations, and what that has meant in terms of infrastructural development. And, it has been a good thing, because that has also attracted other forms of, businesses around these areas. So Nairobi is a very important hub, absolutely important hub, not just for us here and this region. We know any kind of upset that happens in Kenya affects other countries in the East African larger region, because of the strategic positioning of Kenya in terms of its ports and all that. But also, most importantly, I think Kenya is a very important space in terms of just the movement of goods and services, but also it has been a beacon of just peace and stability in this region. So even as we do whatever we do, and as we argue about whatever it is that we are arguing about and disagreeing about, which is very healthy part of democracy. But if you can have sanitized politics, that would be great. For the UN to relocate this part of its project here in Nairobi on top of what it already has, that is a vote of confidence for us as Kenyans, for this country, for this great country. I'm sounding very patriotic this morning, and that is because I am, just like the people in Sudan. When everybody is hurrying out to leave their country, they're stuck there. They have no place to go. And for majority of everybody else in their countries, that is their reality. And that's why I think engaging in a more sober manner and disagreeing in a very sober manner, I think is important. In every human interactions, you can never lack. You can never be thinking the same. That will be problematic. How we are and how we reason and what inspires how we look at life and our perspectives, I think that comes from different of aspirations and lived experiences and things like that. So we are not inclined to reason the same, to agree on the same issues, and that is the beauty of humanity. But if you can have something at the core that holds us together, like how we see in Tanzania, at the end of the day, at the core, they are patriotic. They are Tanzanians first, before anything else. They are Tanzanians first, and then everything else builds on that. So when you have that, and you have respect for that, and you're patriotic enough, and you love your country enough, then anything that builds on top of that will always be for the interest, of the country. So I'm just saying this to say that, first of all, I'm happy from the headlines that I read this morning of the calling off of that mandamano that was to happen today, and also the fact that this political class, they're working together to agree on some of these things that they seem to be having a problem with. So I guess that is a good step. Kenyan democracy, it is robust. We are still growing. We are not there yet, but we are trying. And so these are small wins. I don't know if I should call them wins, but these are things that are just meant. They go a long way in building and strengthening our democracy. So there is space for that, as long as it's not done in a way that threatens the stability of this country. The stability of this country is very important. Can you imagine if today those protests were ongoing, with all these high-level dignitaries that we're having in the country, that have, with them being here, have attracted an international media spotlight. And then we're here having President Ruto meeting with Antonio Guterres. Then on the other side of the streets, we're having police and, the opposition supporters and everybody else burning tires and doing all these things. We're better than that. It's part of our democracy, but can we do it in a way that is not detrimental to our country? even as we allow for all these freedoms to be enjoyed. I'm just saying we can find a balance like you did, like they did, in agreeing to moving these talks forward. I think it's a great thing. So you know what? Okay. So anyway, this office, the United Nations Office for Project Services, is moving to Nairobi, and that move will be completed before the end of the year. So that is another win for Kenya and for Nairobi, and it has gone. That also has, has it has gone to stamp our position as the giant that we are in this region, and the confidence that the rest of the world has in us, in Kenya, and its people, that we have the capacity and the capability of holding and hosting such important international offices here in Nairobi. That is a great stamp of approval. So let's not mess it up. Let's clean our politics. Not possible, but we can have a bit of sanity so that we can have these good things coming our way. This can only happen if we have a good atmosphere that allows for that, and if, the country is perceived to be stable. I know it is stable. Those are just, things that we have to deal with here and there, but obviously Kenya, we are stable. So anyway, so with Sudan, first of all, President Ruto, you making this statement is problematic. You're part of the team that is supposed to be leading this mediation in Sudan. So for you to say this region will not allow at all any military rule and things like that, that is not your space. That is not your place. What is allowed or not allowed in Sudan, that is for them to deal with. I can sit here and say that, but you can't, because you're a head of state, and two, you're part of the mediation team. So you're already going there with a preconceived notion, and and how you want perhaps this mediation to go that might not be in agreement with the other actors in that mediation team. Okay, so I don't know if that was the right thing for you to say, President William Ruto, that this region, he said this region, East Africa, will not agree to have, a military government in Sudan. No, sir, that's not your place. It just reminded me what Paul Kagame said a few months ago that was also problematic when he was saying, even President Felix Tshisekedi did not even win the election anyway, and he's trying to not find a solution for the conflict in the DRC because he does not want to have the elections at the end of this year. Which, by the way, President Paul Kagame, as much as he was out of order, that was not his place. He's head of state, and he's speaking to another head of state. So he crossed the lines of diplomacy. He was wrong to say that. But looking at how things have been playing in DRC, he might have a bit of a point there. He might have a bit of a point there. So, but I'm just saying there are lines that are not to be crossed. Anybody else can talk, but when a head of state or when a government makes a certain statement or takes a certain position, then it can have greater implications. I can sit here and talk about it and say, military rule is not something that should be encouraged in Sudan based on the history and, how that can make the country to be fragile. I can do that, but the president of Kenya cannot say military, government will not be entertained and allowed in Sudan. It's not your place, sir. Okay? So anyway, so we are waiting for IGAD team led by South Sudan, Kenya, and Djibouti to start this mediation. So if this UN official has been able to access Sudan, why can these IGAD leaders also access Sudan? Martin Griffith, I think he's been able to, he's in Sudan and he's been trying to hold talks with both the leaders. That has not happened. I don't know why. And I don't know. It's like there's no moving forward. There's no moving forward. IGAD came quickly and decided on, made a decision on how these talks and who will be part of this mediation team, but nothing much has been done in terms of just actualizing this, and I think that is my worry, because as this prolongs, and the suffering of the people also prolongs, and I think that should be our greatest concern. And so the UN Secretary General also spoke on it. He is in Kenya. Antonio Guterres is in Kenya, and of course that is one of the key things that brought him here, outside of him meeting with the UN staff in Gigiri there. So he is in Kenya, and he's expressed his concern over what is happening. And an envoy of Sudan's army commander, okay, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. This person was in Cairo, and this is what he said. I think he's speaking on behalf of al-Burhan. And he said that he has ruled out face-to-face talks with paramilitary force trying to overthrow him. That is what General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is saying. He is not going to speak to RSF. So why are we wasting our time? That's what I want to know. If you know you have no intentions of talking, why are you giving these mixed signals? Because up until yesterday, before this general said what he's saying, I think you had expressed your willingness to want to be part of this mediation. And the last we were having of this conversation is that a venue was what was yet to be agreed upon, and you had expressed your willingness to send your emissaries to attend these talks. But now, in Cairo, which I know Egypt is offering to hold these mediation talks, I don't think it's the best place for these talks to happen. And I'm not accusing Egypt on anything. I think these talks and this mediation should happen in a place where there is some high level of neutrality. I don't know, that is not easy to achieve 100% because, of the interactions perhaps in the past between states and leaders and all that. But we can find another country that does not seem to have any conflict of interest in the ongoing conflict in Sudan. And so this person, an envoy of Sudan's army commander said, al-Burhan, the head of the military, is not willing to have talks with RSF since they're trying to remove him from power. They're trying to overthrow him, like what they did to former President Omar al-Bashir. Yeah, so he's afraid that is going to happen. And he's saying because of that, RSF is trying to overthrow him. He's not going to have talks with RSF. So if that is the position the army is having and has taken in Sudan, so why are they wasting our time? Why are we having our presidents from Kenya, Djibouti, South Sudan risk their lives, put other agendas of their countries pending, so that they can attend to the issue of trying to help you find peace and come together? If you know you have no commitment of wanting to have a conversation with the other side, and yet on one side you tell us that you are ready and willing to have these conversations, but on the flip side, even how you've been acting shows different. And now you have said you have no intention and you're not going to have a meeting. So what are we doing? What are we doing? When you think people are making steps forward, and now you get to hear of such information, you're wondering, okay, so now how do we move on from here? Because are we not looking for a venue or not? What's going on? Okay, so let me just read a bit of what this envoy of Sudan's army commander said. On Monday, the UN Special Envoy to Dafala Al-Haj said the army accepted an initiative being spearheaded by the US and Saudi Arabia. So that is what I think, that is where they perhaps want, those are the countries perhaps they have confidence in leading this mediation. I'm not sure. So they accepted to broker ceasefire, but communication with the rapid support forces would have to be through mediators, the agency quotes him as saying at a press conference in Egypt's capital, Cairo. So what they're saying is they will not allow for a face-to-face talk between al-Burhan and Hemedi. So these talks, if they were to happen, which we are hoping is what is going on and is what is being prepared, then it has to be through mediators, which is what we're hoping also would happen. Now, on Monday, the UN Special Envoy to Sudan, Volker Perthes, told the AP news agency that the two sides had agreed to negotiate a stable, reliable ceasefire, with Saudi Arabia being potential venue for the talks. Bad idea. Bad idea. Why are we having Saudi Arabia being a potential venue for the talks? I support Isaias Afwerki on his position on this matter. Okay, part of his position, because the rest I don't agree with. And what he said was, it should be this conflict, the larger East African region, that's what he said, and IGAD, should be given the opportunity to take over and lead this mediation and facilitate this mediation and spearhead this process without other outside players. And I agree with him on this. The rest of his statements I don't agree with. But up to that point, I agree with what President of Eritrea, Isaias Afwerki, said. The minute you start bringing in these external actors, and Saudi Arabia, we know, go back and look up for information that led up to the removal of former President Omar al-Bashir and the role, allegedly, that Saudi Arabia played in the ousting of Omar al-Bashir, and which side, which side he supported, and which Sudanese minister was working for Omar al-Bashir. It was like this, the super minister. Here we used to have Matiang'i, right now I don't know who that is, but he was a super minister. He was like, if you needed to access the president, you had to go through him, okay? He was like the privilege, the first minister or something like that, okay? So because of that, and then in the process, while he was serving, it was a very powerful minister under Omar al-Bashir's regime. And while he was serving there, he was also serving as a double agent. He was also serving, without the knowledge of Omar al-Bashir, the interest of Saudi Arabia. Okay? So once that was discovered, he left the country and went to Saudi Arabia. And immediately he went to Saudi Arabia, he was given a nationality. He was granted that. So when Sudan and the ousting happened and things fell apart, and Saudi Arabia sent its team to try and help in mediation in Sudan, guess who was part of that entourage? The dual citizen of Sudan and Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is not, we should not have these talks happen in Saudi Arabia. These talks should happen in Kenya. Matter of fact, I can propose Tanzania. Tanzania will be a great space. Nairobi always is a great space. We could have that happen. We could even take them back to, like we did with Ethiopia, to South Africa. But we cannot have these talks happen anywhere out of Africa. We cannot have these external actors who have worked in creating this conflict, in supporting either of these sides, who have immense interest that they're fighting for, their own interest, not for the interest of the stability and the people of Sudan, but their own interest. So we cannot have these players. We cannot have Saudi Arabia. We cannot have Egypt purport to want to provide for a space for mediation for a conflict that the allegations that they have something to do with it, even if not now. Years back, they have supported one or either side, allegedly. So we cannot have, this cannot happen in Saudi Arabia. Let these talks happen even in Uganda. It's a great place. Let these talks happen anywhere else. We have so many countries in this continent that we cannot lack one that can provide for the good offices where this mediation can take place. And that's what we need, not outside. Not outside the continent, and certainly not in Saudi Arabia. Because now the politics of the Gulf and the disagreement around there, and that has been a key factor in Sudan as well, that will come playing. This rapid support forces has been a source of income for Hemedi. They've been sending these people out to fight in the wars in Yemen and Syria that were supported by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and how that has been working in Iran, how that has been working there. So there's already a conflict of interest because of this. We cannot afford for these talks to go to Saudi Arabia. It's not a neutral party, allegedly, but it's not. Okay? So let's have those talks here. Let's have those talks in the continent, surely. Let's even take them to Rwanda then. President Paul Kagame, the great Pan-African, will be happy to have these talks there. And he's a general, so perhaps he will speak a language that they understand. Okay? But not in Saudi Arabia. If you get these talks out of this country and if you allow these foreign actors to be involved in this conflict in Sudan, they're already involved, but if we give them another leeway to also be part of this mediation, they will meddle. Their interest will be playing out. The proxy wars will be intensified, and we shall never see the end of this conflict the same way we are stuck with this conflict in the DRC because of the many external actors that are involved. Let's look at the example of Ethiopia that I keep giving here. African Union took charge, and a few African countries were involved in the mediation. It was very quick. But if we would have done a mistake of bringing in EU, of bringing in so-and-so, of bringing in, that would have been problematic. And Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, I think, stood his ground and said, no, these talks would only be spearheaded by the African Union. And he refused to allow any other external factor, even though there were also other foreign external factors that were at play in that conflict. But because they were blocked out of the mediation process, we saw some progress. Okay? And I will update you later on at 3 p.m. on the status of that mediation process that was going on between the OLA and the Ethiopian government. Apparently, it has not gone on very well. I think they stalled or they stopped without any kind of resolution. But that is a conversation we shall have in our later broadcast at 3 p.m. East African time. But for right now, what I'm saying is South Sudan is not the place where we can even decide that is a potential venue for the talks. The military has continued with airstrikes in the capital Khartoum in the attempt to weaken the RSF. The paramilitaries are said to control most of Khartoum, with hardly any soldiers or police officers on the streets. Previous attempts by international mediators to broker truce have failed, as we have seen that playing out there. So that is that on that on the update on Sudan and what is happening there. So Malawi has been reeling from this cyclone that happened in the country in March, and Malawi has been pleading for help. And it is sad that it has to keep pleading, I think we should be our brother's keeper. The same way we saw help being sent to Turkey and Syria after that earthquake. Of course, that was more deadly and all that. And they needed all the help they can get. Even African countries were very quick to offer that help, which is fantastic. But why are we not so quick in helping our own here? Why is Malawi, many months later, still begging for help? Why hasn't African Union perhaps compelled the member states to come in and try and help Malawi? It needs about $700 million to rebuild. So many lives were affected. About 700,000 people were rendered homeless. We know Malawi does not have the strongest economy, so it does need the help of especially the people from this continent. Chakwera's appeal comes 2 weeks after the UN renewed a flash appeal to humanitarian partners in April. The UN did that, and it was able to collect. It appealed for $70.6 million to support the cyclone victims, and the UN says less than 11% of that was donated. So not even that was given to Malawi. Only 11% was donated. It appealed for 70.6 million, and only 11% of the 70.6 million was donated to Malawi. If this was another Western country, if this was Ukraine, if this was another country in the Western Hemisphere, in the north, in the global north, let me say that, in the global north, then you would have seen overwhelming support. But because we are where we are and we are who we are here in Africa, you find that our emergencies don't really attract that level of response, that level of empathy, that level of concern from the international community. And we can blame them all day long, and we should. But at the end of the day, we are also not doing enough as a people. Why is one of our countries here, many months later, still suffering, while we can collect within ourselves the kind of amount of the kind of help, even in terms of just the things that they need, and just buy and help these families? I know every country is going through a very tough time, but why does the president of Malawi keep appealing for this? This is, I don't know, the 18th time President Chakwera is appealing for international help. Why can't we show a brotherly love here in the continent and help Malawians? We might not afford to give everything, all of the help that they need, but we can surely put up something together as a continent to just help alleviate some of the suffering, or just meet a bit of the needs of these people who were affected in this cyclone. So it's just, I think it's just disappointing that even the international community is the one that has to give this money, the UN, while we don't have that drive being led by African Union, and just, beseeching the member states to help Malawi. So it is disappointing, and President Jaquera has been asking and asking and begging, for help. Surely we can do better than that. We are Africans. And our cultures that I think cuts across. We usually are our brothers' keepers, so let's not lose that. Let not have the people of Malawi beg so much for this help that we can actually help. We can offer, while we can at least do something, just a little bit, to help in that, just show our solidarity and our support for Malawians who are really going through very tough times. And their rains have been pounding also Rwanda, so Rwanda is also going through very tough times. I think by right now over 120 people have reported dead from the floods and all that. So I think that is also something that I will be updating you with much later. I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll see you at 3 p.m. and we shall bring you the status of that mediation process between Ethiopia and OLA that was happening in Tanzania, and I'll let you know what really is going on there. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. In the meantime, my name is Miriam Magutu. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.